Yeah.
Fab. Thank you, Mads, and hi everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you. Didn't expect so many, to be honest, which is a little bit nerve-wracking. Mads, I think you've probably covered a lot of what I was about to say, but I'll still kind of go through. Yeah, it's lovely to meet any of you who I haven't already met before. I'm head of content at Conscious, and alongside heading up the copywriting team, I help Conscious kind of drive our AI initiatives, keeping up to date with latest developments through training and research, and then I try and translate that and deliver external and internal sessions. Whilst artificial intelligence has been around for, decades, generative AI as we know it, I started working on that back in kind of 20 November 2022 when OpenAI launched its first version of ChatGPT. And since then, I've just really enjoyed seeing how it's developing, and I'm really interested in what it's going to do next, and then, in effect, what that means for the legal industry. Um, as someone who is a copywriter by trade, I think people often question why I'm so comfortable using AI. I'm working with it, but I've never really seen it as a threat. And I do just generally think it's a really exciting opportunity that can allow us to go beyond what we have done before. And I think it's not our ability to just perform tasks that makes us really valuable in work. It's our ability to learn and adapt. And that's why I think AI is such a great, that kind of gives us the perfect chance to do that. As Mad said, there is so much to cover when it comes to AI, because with all these opportunities brings lots of questions, particularly around security, legislation, ethics, all of which are extremely important conversations for us to have. But I wanted to make sure that this session was really focused on hands-on learning, practical tips that you can take away today and implement, as soon as you want to. But as always, if you have any questions and if there's any specific areas that you'd really like some further information on, we could maybe look at doing a follow-up session. Um, but I'll also make sure that Mads has all the slides, so she can send those to you afterwards. So hopefully you can use some of the prompts that I give you today. So let's get started. So we're going to start off by just doing some general talking around my thoughts around AI and how I think we should approach it. Then I will go on to the AI sandwich method. And then we'll look at a prompt framework that you can use when you're trying to get anything out of AI. Then we'll look at some tools and my kind of recommendations around them. We'll look at some prompt examples using the methods above. We'll then go on to custom GPTs. Then we'll do some final tips and takeaways before the Q&A. Does that all sound okay? Yeah, I can only see a few of you, but I can see some nodding, so hopefully that's fine. Um, okay. So yeah, the main thing I think I would really like you to take away from this is that I think it's really important for us to embrace AI as a thinking partner. And you know, rather than seeing it solely as a faster way of to do things or to kind of take off routine tasks, I want us to kind of think of it as kind of sparring partner that we can bounce ideas off so that it becomes a much more collaborative experience. AI has a really great ability to kind of surface blind spots that we might miss ourselves when we're kind of zeroed in on the bigger picture. Um, and it sometimes highlights questions and suggests alternative interpretations that we might not think of ourselves. Another thing with AI is that we often talk about its lack of context being an issue, and sometimes it can be, and it's really important to feed it context. But sometimes actually the lack of preconceptions that it has can benefit us because it doesn't have those internal anxieties or blockers that we might have as people working within businesses. It allows us to sort of think outside the box and go beyond our kind of normal constraints. Um, and really importantly, and this is where the sandwich method comes in that I'll go through in a second, I think the best way to use AI is to use it as a middle layer between our initial thoughts and your final tweaks. So you've always got that human shield around it. So it almost is like a bridge that takes your ideas and refines them, and then you can go back. So it just means that AI becomes, I feel, for me anyway, I feel a lot more comfortable using it that way rather than it being, an alternative to human work. So let me show you that in more detail. So the AI sandwich method, this is something that I think we should just use when we're talking about our general thoughts around AI and how we use it in general. So it sort of follows a four-step approach. And yeah, in the shape of a sandwich, so it's a little bit easy to remember. So the seed sort of, yeah, beginning with your own material and outline, draft, some data that you have, some insights, and that really anchors then the process with, what you need. Enhance, so that's where you're asking the AI to maybe transform that input, to edit, to reframe it, to summarize complex, text, to to offer questions that you might not have spotted, giving you that fresh perspective. Then refine, so that's where you review every suggestion for accuracy, compliance, and style. You can tighten up language, you can give it some feedback around the language that it's provided you with, and then iterate. So feeding your revised draft back into the AI and then kind of going deeper then into hopefully, closer towards a more polished draft. So this sort of method moves us away from those really kind of general short uses of AI, like just generate titles or clean notes. And whilst those things are really helpful, it just means that we stay in control of every step. It allows us to go a bit deeper with strategy, audiences, and delivers much better results. And I think this is really important when it comes to AI because I know I'm sure some of you have very similar thoughts and feelings around it. And, when we're thinking about risks of AI and what makes us feel uncomfortable, it's because we're giving it so much responsibility. But actually, if we ensure that we've got that human insight at the top of the process and the bottom, then it makes me feel a bit safer. If that makes sense. So if I know there's a lot of information, so if you do have any questions throughout, feel free to raise your hand. I'm not sure if I can see, but Mads, you can let me know, I think.
Yeah, I'll monitor the chat. And like George said, we'll send the recording and everything to you after the session so you can watch it back. And then if anything pops up, you can get in contact with myself or Georgia to ask any further questions.
Yeah, brilliant. So that's the kind of overall idea. That's how I like to think about using AI. And then when I go into the further slides, you'll see how this all kind of fits in together. So let me go on to prompting. So when we talk about prompting, we're talking about the instruction or the question that you provide to a model to guide its response. A good, clear prompt can turn a really vague idea into something that you can use straight away, but knowing how much detail and really what to give it can be very overwhelming. And I know that's the case. I follow a lot of newsletters and LinkedIn posts, and I feels like there's so much out there, and sometimes you just don't know which of the rules you need to follow. But ultimately, the only thing that's important is the way you're prompting. So online templates are a really great place to begin, and they give you that structure and starting point. But what I'd really advise is you sort of treating those templates as a starting point and then adapting them to suit you and your work and what you want. And further to that, more tailored, personalized prompts will essentially mean that the content that it comes out with is fresh, is more original, and it will allow you to stand out a lot more. So that's kind of why prompts are really important, and why they have such a great impact on the work that we're doing with AI. And there's no single perfect prompt for every situation. What matters is sort of finding the right balance between the context, the constraints, and examples that fits your firm's style and your own way of thinking. And like any skill, it improves with process and practice. So it's absolutely fine to experiment, refine, and sometimes you'll put something into the models and it won't quite work, and then you'll acknowledge that, and then you can try something else. Don't shy away from trying lots of different prompting methods and just finding what suits you and what you're happy with, because it will be different for everyone. But with that being said, I have created a simple framework which you can hopefully apply every time you are trying to use AI and prompt. Of course, I've tried to keep it on brand, but hopefully it will be memorable at least. So we have, as you might have expected, orange, which is objective, role, audience, nuance, guidelines, and example. So let's run through what that actually means.
This is
So we have,
amazing, by the way, Georgia. You should been
Thank
in
you.
the
I was very
marketing team.
proud. I did use Canva yesterday to try and jazz it up a little bit. Um, but yes, thank you, Mads. So orange stands for objective. So be really clear on what you need and what the output should achieve. This is where you outline the purpose, define the desired result, ensuring that the model understands exactly what it needs to do. So, and I'll show you examples of this later. But if you're saying, I'd like you to help me craft a newsletter, the purpose of this newsletter is to inform the internal team on, etc. So that's you're just giving it that broad context of what the output it needs to do, essentially. Role, and anyone that's on this call that has been involved in the internal training sessions will recognize this, but this is just something I like to do when giving a prompt to kind of establish a perspective or a persona the model should adopt. So you can say things like you are a marketing executive with X experience, you are a partner, you are just depending on what you want. So say, for example, you're helping to write LinkedIn posts for someone else in the company, you can adjust that there. And it just helps tailor the response that it's going to give. Then we have A for audience. So identify who will receive or use that output. By naming the audience, you control that level of formality, detail, and the vocabulary. And that will make the response more relevant and accessible. This is a bit of a stretch, I know, and I did, Joe on the call will know I did try and get some alternatives to nuance, but I couldn't make it work. So nuance is what we're going with. But nuance is, where you define the tone and the style to reflect your brand, specifying any sort of nuance to the language or what you need will really help guide that. So that's essentially where you'll kind of get your tone of voices. I think it does kind of work, so we're going to go with it. Then we have G for guidelines, so lay out any constraints, structure, formatting rules, word limits, bullet point preferences, that kind of thing. And again, all of this, you could make an orange prompt that is, one line each, or you could go in with loads of detail. This is a really good structure to follow to get there. And then E for examples, so providing representative samples, existing newsletters, existing LinkedIn posts, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, giving it some examples there is brilliant. You can either paste the examples in to the prompt, or you can add them as files and just say, I've added some examples, whatever feels best to you. I actually prefer to copy and paste the examples in if I can. But it's good either way. So by following this with every prompt, you're giving the model a clear, focused direction of what it needs to do. And I've just find that following this kind of format consistently gets a lot better outputs than you would if you were just to kind of give it a quick paragraph summarizing what you need. And this was obviously this is on brand. This is generally a kind of an amalgamation of lots of advice I've taken from different training sessions where these are the kind of structures that we need to follow. So hopefully that makes sense. And then, yeah, so to kind of summarize those two methods, sandwich is the overarching thinking of how we should approach AI and how we should work with it day to day. So that seed, enhance, refine, and iterate defines when and how you engage with AI. And it's sort of something I think is just really good to keep in the back of your mind whenever using AI, that it should always be that really human-led process. And then orange is a prompting method that we can use to kind of adopt that. And that's something you can think about when you're actually giving a prompt to any of the AI models. That is really what structures what you ask at every step. And I think the sandwich method sort of reframes AI from simple, productivity hack to a genuine thinking partner. And it really hones in on your own experience and uses your skills that are really valuable to the business and the reason why you're there. And it's really making the most of that, as well as looking at AI as a really helpful tool, rather than it just being something that we kind of put some information into and get a solid output straight away. Okay, let's move on. Well, first of all, does that kind of all make sense? Is everyone happy with that, with the kind of distinction between the two?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. As I said, this will all be sent to you after the webinar, so you can see it. Don't worry if you don't have any of that down, that will be with you. So tools, when it comes to tools, there are thousands out there. And it can be really tempting to try all of them. I don't know if anyone else kind of gets AI newsletters, which updates every single week with a long list of tools that you can try. And whilst at Conscious, that's part of what we do. We're always testing and trialing these new tools, and some of them are brilliant. My kind of main advice, I think, for most marketing teams within law firms is to really hone down on one or two tools that you can focus your knowledge and your expertise on so that you're not spreading yourself too thin. And this is really good as well because it means that it's easier to onboard, it's easier to train. And a lot of, the main models that we're going to talk about, those are the ones that are adopting all of these new features. They're the safest. They have, great ability. They have the best models. So that's what my general advice would be. Even though it's good to kind of keep up to date with new tools, I'd recommend sort of picking one or two and then focusing your efforts there. So the two tools that I'm going to look at today are ChatGPT and Perplexity. So ChatGPT, as I'm sure all of you know and have used, it kind of leads in the market with its new features and its integrations. It offers a number of models, features, and it with the plus and paid versions, it has really good security and control. Perplexity, I'm not sure if everyone else is familiar with that one. It's slightly newer, but it's definitely becoming a lot more popular now. It works in a very similar way, but I just find it has some really good traits that maybe ChatGPT isn't as strong on. So for me, I like to use a mixture of both for different uses. But essentially, both of them are large language models, and they share a kind of common foundation in terms of how they're built. So they're transformer-based models that can understand context, generate human quality text, and learns every time that you put more information into the tools. Both offer paid plans depending on what you need. And I'll go into some more specific advice on the individual tools, but ultimately I always recommend that you go for the paid versions as they are a lot better and they're a lot stronger. Looking at the kind of differences between the two, so ChatGPT is really optimized for open-ended conversation and creative drafting. I find it's a lot better if you're doing any sort of writing. And I tend to find Perplexity is a lot better when it comes to things like error spotting or fact checking. So I'll explain a little bit further down the line sort of how you can maybe use those tools in conjunction, but ultimately don't worry if you don't want to use both. You can pick one. ChatGPT would probably be my preference if I was going to pick one to use on its own. But I think they can both really complement each other. And it's sometimes nice to have a different perspective, even though that perspective is not a human perspective. So with ChatGPT, they, again, as all tools, they're updating constantly. So when I was doing the initial research for this webinar, when I started that a couple of weeks ago, and then when I was looking back on notes this week, the features are already changing, changing every single week. So it's quite difficult to keep up to date with. But just this is kind of how I use ChatGPT, and this is what I'd always recommend to kind of just make it a little bit more simpler and a bit less overwhelming. So I'd always recommend investing in a paid account. It gives you access to the most reliable models. It has stronger data protection, and it has early access to all the new features. So if you use the free account, you'll probably know that there's a kind of character limit. There's a limit on how many searches you can do with the new models. So for about £20 a month, I think it is so valuable and really worth it if you can do that. So what I tend to do is use ChatGPT 4 or 4.5 when that arrives for the writing and drafting. So I will show you the models in a second to show you where that comes in, but essentially all of these tools have a kind of number of models which then powers the output. So this is what I would recommend. So GPT-4 for writing and drafting, and then GPT-04 Mini, God, for things like problem solving, data-led questions. And the reason why that's good is because it has reasoning, and I'll show you that in a second as well. And you can kind of almost see its thought process, which is quite strange. But those are the two that I tend to kind of switch between depending on what I'm doing. And then when it comes to folders and organization, I prefer to kind of keep everything organized within folders. So depending on what my work is, so it might be LinkedIn or webinars, or it could be that you've got particular project, you can organize that all into folders. So once you've done some prompts, you can just click add to folder, add it in there, and it just keeps everything really organized. And it also starts to kind of build memory around those prompts that you're filing in together. And then finally, we have custom GPTs, which I will go into a little bit more detail with soon. But that's a kind of a way to really level up your AI work for kind of ongoing strategy projects or even routine tasks, because it's a great way to kind of put the information in, invest that time, and then let it do the work afterwards. So I'll show you how to do that later on. And then Perplexity, so very similarly, and again, I'll show you both of the tools up against each other soon. But again, I'd always recommend investing in a paid account. The kind of response time of Perplexity is extremely fast, and much better on the paid version. Something I haven't actually written this down, but something that's great about these tools now compared to maybe a year ago is that they now both have that live search function. So when you are doing research, when you're getting a response, it's not just putting text on the screen and not showing you where it's coming from. It shows you exactly where it's getting that information from, which makes research a lot easier, and it makes me feel a lot more comfortable doing that. Always fact check and always look at that original source, but it makes it a lot faster. For Perplexity, so one of the main differences between Perplexity and ChatGPT is that ChatGPT is only using OpenAI models to produce the information, whereas Perplexity uses a kind of mixture of lots of the big tools. So you'll see it's got Claude Sonnet, it's got Gemini, it's got Sonar, and it also has the OpenAI one. So it's a really good tool to use if you want to kind of test out different models, but you just want to keep it in one place. So, and again, I'll show you how you select those models in a second, but what I would recommend is Claude 3.7 Sonnet for writing, and again, the OpenAI O4 Mini for problem solving and data-led prompts. Perplexity is really great for research. It's actually becoming very popular amongst people to actually use as their, predominant search engine. I'm not quite there myself, but that is something that's coming up because of its ability to kind of pull those resources really quickly and show you where it's coming from. They also have a function now which is kind of deep research, so you can give it a topic or maybe even give it your firm and see what it comes out with. It will present you kind of like an academic essay, and when it did it for Conscious, David actually said he was impressed, so that's good to know. And quality control Perplexity is great for, and this is something that I like to use it for a lot, which is giving it a document but previously kind of giving it a set of guidelines that I need to keep an eye on and asking it to check for those formatting or structure guidelines. And then you can kind of keep that prompt going. You can give it different documents and it's always going to look out for those things. So yeah, I think Perplexity is really good for more kind of, I'm not sure quite what the word is, but any tasks that involve looking at formatting or numbering, trying to make sure things line up, it's great for stuff like that. Whereas ChatGPT is a little bit more on the creative side. Okay. So as I mentioned before, you could either choose to just choose one of these tools and yeah, just have that single tool approach, or you can use both tools and combine them. Both are really valuable, but there is no right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on what you think. So if you would like to just choose one of the tools, and maybe you don't have the budget to go further into another tool and you just want to keep things really simple, I'd really recommend that. As I said, I'd probably recommend ChatGPT as just a kind of a standard response to that question, because even though Perplexity has its benefits, ChatGPT is a kind of holistic, really great tool. Or if you'd like to do a combined approach and you have the time and budget, you can get the benefits of both. So one way that I really like to use both of these tools is maybe doing some creative work in ChatGPT and then using Perplexity to suggest optimizations or alternative perspectives. I find that really good. And I'll also show you in a second how you can use it to build custom GPTs. I think both, I need to double check the pricing, but I think it's still around £20 each month per tool. But it's worth it if you can get that. So I'm just gonna see if I can do this now without messing anything up and show you both the tools up against each other. So this, can you see these okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, fab. So as you can see, that, and as I know many of you will know because you would have used these tools, but they look very, very similar up against each other. They've both got that search box here. They've got some features on the side which allow you to kind of manage the workspace. Then they also have all these kind of different buttons down here for different purposes. So with ChatGPT, one thing to note is if you want to switch the model, so that's where we were talking about the ChatGPT 4 and the 04 Mini for, different uses, you select that up here. So as I recommended, I pretty much keep it on 04 Mini if I'm doing any problem solving or data-led things. And then if I want to do any kind of more writing, I'd maybe change that to ChatGPT 4. But as you can see down here, sorry, I clicked the wrong one then. The GPT-4 is down here, but GPT 4.5 is there. It's actually previewing at the minute on the Pro version, but it'll be released soon, and the other one's getting deleted. But so you can have a play around with all of these. 03 Mini High is meant to be great for coding and visual reasoning. And you can also have a look at scheduled tasks as well. But those are the two, if you're kind of just looking for a kind of default setting, that's what I'd recommend. Down here you have the search function. So that's where I was talking about if you want to research something, if you tick that, then it will show you. These are not my recent searches, by the way. These are general searches. I wasn't sure what was going to pop up then. And then, so if you search something there and you click search, it will show you the references of everything that it's come out with, so you can easily fact check whether that's true. And to be completely honest, I haven't seen any major hallucinations in a very long time. When I first started using it, it would sometimes there'd be some questionable answers, but I haven't had anything wrong for a long time personally. You can select deep research to give you some more kind of fleshed out answers and some more academic responses. You can create images if you so wish to, and then you can also use a canvas. So this is really good if you're asking it to help you draft something and you want it to appear in a kind of collaborative board. So it will essentially just pop up. You can type, you can chat, you can go in the chat box and say, I don't like that first paragraph. Can you change it? And it will just change that paragraph. So it's great for that more collaborative way of working with it. And you can also obviously use the dictate and voice mode function, which I don't do too much, but I can imagine it'd be quite fun. But that's pretty much everything here. So then on the left-hand side, we've got just new chat, custom GPTs, which I'll show you in a second. Projects, I've just put some example ones in here for the minute. But on the copywriting team, we would have like a shared account so that if there's anything that we could all use or we'd all, someone wants to share knowledge, it will be in one account. So these projects are what I'd recommend of how you can organize your prompts. And then this is just a history of everything here. On the right-hand side, you'll see there's this little drop-down menu. And if you go into settings and then you go into, where is it? Yeah, data controls. I just recommend you turn this off, which is improve the model for everyone. If anyone's worried about, what information you're putting in and whether this is going to remember it. If you have that turned off, it just means that and this is just on a paid account, I just need to clarify. So if you're on a paid account, it says, you can see it at the bottom here, OpenAI does not use Constant Solutions workspace data to train its models. So I would just recommend turning that off there. And then you can also personalize it. So you can add custom instructions. I haven't done it on this account, but you can just give it some really basic information around who you are, what traits you'd like ChatGPT to have, just in general when it's giving you responses. I'm gonna reject any of these ones here. I don't know if you can see them, but I'm not sure when you'd want it to respond in that kind of way, but you can tailor that to yourself if you just to kind of give it some background. And so it might be good to put some information around your firm here, just so it's always got that context in mind. Okay, so that's pretty much everything there. Let me just quickly think if there was anything. There's a temporary function here you can add in to, so if you want to continue, it almost works like a incognito browser, but that's just I'm sure that's not something you need to use too much. On Perplexity, so it works in a very similar way. So you've got the home button here. That's where you create a new thread. So you can just click the add button. That's where we are now. Then it's got homepage, discover, spaces. So that's kind of that's basically just folders. It's just another word for that. So that space is when you create a prompt, you can add it to that space, and then the library here of all your prompts. So that's it's very similar to ChatGPT. It's just set out in a slightly different way. To change the model on Perplexity, you click this little button here, and then those options come down. So as I was mentioning, that Claude 3.7 Sonnet, that's there. 04 Mini. So there's lots of different models you can try, and you can just change that every time you want a prompt, and it will respond using that data set in the background. So you have the research function, the search function. Search is a little bit faster than research, but research is just if you want to get a bit more of an in-depth thought. You can set sources. You can change it to web, academic, or social. You can upload files, and that's another thing I didn't mention. You can do the same on ChatGPT, and you can also use the voice mode there as well. It gives lots of suggestions around Trump on Perplexity, I find. But yeah, that's just bear in mind that it's just coming up with common searches there. So that's both platforms, very similar, and I think they're trying to make them as kind of they're kind of becoming very extremely close together. But just one thing to keep an eye on is that these models do change quite a lot. As soon as there's a new update, this might change one day to the next. So it's have a play around with them and see what you think. But the recommendations that I've got on this presentation is what I would personally recommend. Before I go back to the presentation, does anyone have any questions around the platforms or how to use them at all? Everything?
No, there's nothing in the chat. I think we'll stop the recording after you've finished, and then we'll see if there's any questions or anything people want to chat through.
Fab. Okay, I will go back to my presentation if I can figure out how to do this. I always somehow find a way to mess it up. Okay, here we go. There we are. Everyone can see that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
So let's move on here. So now we're just going to have a look at a prompt template that you could use in any of the tools, and that's using the Orange framework. So again, as I said, I'll make sure this is all available to you. But essentially, one way I really like to use AI is in a kind of like it's like AI inception, I like to call it, where you're using AI to help you do more work with AI. But essentially what you're doing is you're asking it to help you craft a prompt when you need one and you're not sure exactly how to frame it. So this, for example, is something you could put into a model and just say, you're an expert marketing consultant for a law firm. I need help creating a prompt for AI to help me with the following task. And then you say what that task is. And then you ask it to build that orange prompt for you. So you can give it more information at that point if you want, but it's essentially just an easy way to get a prompt if you're not exactly sure how to structure it. So you might just have a kind of paragraph that someone's given you as a brief. You could maybe give that and then ask it to complete that in that structure. And a really good way of doing this is kind of having that prompt and then continuing to use that prompt thread every time you want a new prompt because it will familiarize itself with your feedback. So yeah, it's explaining here, that objectives, exactly what the AI should achieve, the persona or content AI should adopt, who will read it, the tone, constraints, and then some examples. So that's just a simple prompt template you can use to build another prompt. I'm sorry if that sounds confusing. Um, and then I'm just going to move on to some examples of prompts that I thought might be helpful for people within law firm marketing teams, that's looking at using AI in a way that's got that human shield on both ends, but also is following that orange framework. So this is a way where we want to refresh a company newsletter. So you're giving it something which is the newsletter content, but you're asking it to help you improve that. So the objective is to refresh the monthly newsletter to boost reader engagement and clarity. You're a senior marketing editor specializing in legal communications, audience, current clients, and prospective leads. Formal yet approachable, concise, and actionable is the kind of tone of voice you want to adopt. Guidelines, examples. So this is a really brief, basic example of this, and you could make this a lot longer if you wish, but this is just one way that I would suggest using it. And then it will, and you've just clarified at the end, if you can please rewrite the above intro and suggest 2 new section headings. So that way it's kind of, it feels like a joint attempt at trying to create something. And I'll show you when we look at the custom GPTs, how you can build on this to make that even better. Another one, this one is for using Google reviews to write social media copy. So I don't know if any of you were in the last webinar that was run by Joe Markovich, our senior copywriter, who I think is on the call, but I can't see. And we talked about ways in which we can use Google reviews and online reviews to build on our tone of voice and the way that we present ourselves. And I think one of the questions was, when you're writing for lots of law firms as us, how do we know that we're going to be different from someone else? And we said that one way of really looking at this is looking at your own personal reviews, seeing what language your clients are using about you when they're describing your services, and then trying to bring that into your website presence or your web presence. So this prompt asks to craft 3 LinkedIn posts that draw on real client feedback. So you're looking at targeting legal professionals and business owners, conversational and authentic, using clients' own words where possible. The guidelines are there that it needs to be under 150 words, and you're including a direct quote from one of the Google reviews, and then you're giving it the examples of the actual reviews that have come from your clients. So again, it's that sort of equal weighting of human work and the AI expertise and getting that balance. Then we have the last one, which is using feedback to inform a webinar script. So I'm not sure how many of you do webinars or maybe do podcasts. I know quite a lot of firms do that. So I thought this could be a really good way of using it, of asking the AI to take on board feedback that you've had from a previous webinar to inform a script that you're working on or a plan. So the objective is to improve the webinar closing script based on audience comments. The audience are webinar attendees who asked for more practical steps. Then you're talking about the tone, the guidelines, and then the examples are that feedback, or those are the kind of resources. So then you're just saying, can you rewrite the closing script to incorporate these points? So whilst that seems like a really small section, you could build on that, and you could ask it to look at your entire script based on any feedback you've had, or you can even ask it just for general suggestions on what maybe you're missing. So again, that's a good way of sort of thinking of AI in a slightly different way than just kind of generating something final. And then just quickly before I move on to this, has anyone had any experience with custom GPTs, or has anyone created one before? No, I can see
No, it
people
doesn't look
shaking
like
their head.
anyone has.
Yeah, okay, great. And that's the thing, it's something that you don't need to do, and in no way is this the only option to get the results that we're going to talk about. But it's a really good way to level up if you're at that stage and you're wanting to go a bit further. And I just thought I'd show you what they are and how you can create one, because whilst you could spend a lot of time building a kind of really extravagant custom GPT, you can actually build a really simple one within under an hour if you wanted to. So a custom GPT is essentially an AI assistant that you can tailor to your organization. You can set it up by giving it clear instructions, example prompts, and reference materials like style guides and templates. It helps to learn your company's voice, preferred style, and rules a lot more than it would just in a kind of regular thread. Whilst the tools are really good at doing that, a custom GPT is just a way to kind of enhance that again. So you can use it to help draft emails, write social media posts, summarize research. I think personally the best ways to use a custom GPT is if you've got like an ongoing project which you're going to need back and forth with for a long time and you're looking to constantly develop it, or if it's something on the flip side, which is actually quite a simple routine task that you just kind of want to hand off and you want to be able to focus on more high value work. It almost acts as a kind of house for the prompts. You can update the instructions and examples over time, but they can really help us when it comes to, looking at those tasks where they're a little bit lower value than other tasks that we really need to spend the time on, but we just don't get the chance to do. So the way that custom GPTs work is that you build a configuration, which I'll show you in a second. You give it instructions, you give a description, a name, you feed it some documents, and then essentially that will all be saved. And then you go in and you prompt within the custom GPT. So I'll show all of this in a second because it might sound a bit confusing. Let me just go here. But again, one thing that I think is really great when it comes to building custom GPTs is that you can use AI to do that. So again, that sort of AI inception, but it's really helpful. And this is what I do all the time. So you can essentially describe your requirements to AI, which is, create a GPT for drafting client newsletters. That will then generate the metadata. So that's all of the information that's going in the instruction. So the details, the name, the telling you what files to upload. Then you can refine your instructions using that kind of orange framework, and then you assemble and iterate it. So I'll show you that in action in a second. But what I tend to do is I normally use Perplexity to help me build the custom GPT, and then I enter it in. So this all sounds really messy, but it is actually really simple once you asked for the instructions and then you just basically copy and paste them in. You could do that in ChatGPT as well. You don't need to go into another tool. You can just open a ChatGPT prompt and ask for the information, but it's a really good way of kind of getting all those ideas in a kind of really specific format. So this is what I would do then. So this is a prompt you can do. So you can literally just copy and paste this into one of the tools. So Perplexity or ChatGPT, and you obviously just tailor it to your firm and what you want to do. So this one says, I'd like your help building a custom GPT. The purpose of this GPT will be to write, edit, and optimize our internal newsletter for firm. I would like you to help build the interface. So the requirements of the custom GPT interface are, I'm giving it that, and then just please let me know if there's any information you need from me to build this. So I'll just quickly, again, show you what that looks like. Here we go. So I did this one in Perplexity, so you can just see here. So yeah, I copied and pasted that prompt here. And obviously it's just used firm there, but that would change. And then it's come back with this. So it said to build an effective custom GPT, I'd need the following details. So it's quite a lot of information, but if you're happy to kind of invest that hour at the start, it can be really useful moving forward and it can really save you time. So it's asked here for some context around the firm, some information around the newsletter, how the newsletter is currently produced, maybe some pain points, and then some questions about your goals. So I gave it some just kind of what's the word? Just like example information. So none of this is obviously accurate, but this is what you can do. So you just give it that information, and then it comes out then with all of the information you need to build the custom GPT. So the GPT then, so once you've got all of that, you then go into ChatGPT And if you click here, it says explore GPTs. And I've put all the instructions on the next slide so you can see. And you just click my GPTs there. So what you would do is just select create a GPT here. So this is the configuration page. So as you can see, it all lines up with what the AI has given us. So it's giving it you a name. You can change that. Obviously, you don't need to go with their suggestion, but it's giving you the description here. So you would paste that in there. The instructions, so you can copy that, pop that in the instructions. Conversation starters, so you can add those one by one. So again, it just might be things that you might need to do again and again, but it will just all be saved. So you can add those, and then it's suggested some files to upload to kind of improve the knowledge base. So and then you just press save. Once that's done, you press create, and this is one I made earlier, as if I'm Mary Berry or something, but this is the one that I made using that example. So this is what it looks like. So it essentially looks like ChatGPT, but it's now your own custom GPT with all of that information that we've provided it with. So if I just go to edit, you'll be able to see where I've put that information in. So we've got the name, description, instructions, conversation starters, and the knowledge. So I've saved that. And as you can see, you can go in and update this whenever you want. You can press update and it will save. So you just go back in here. And then, so you can either ask it any prompts that you want, any random questions you have, you can ask it for specific things, or you can use that kind of conversation starter library that you've already built. So if you had all that information already, you know, what Perplexity asked me for, which was context around the firm, if you had all that in a document, the actual building then of the custom GPT takes about 5 minutes. So it's just making sure you've got all that information, but the actual configuration of it is really simple. So yeah, you might want to build those custom GPTs for different tasks, different projects, and see how you get on with them. It might be good to start something small, something that's kind of like quite a quick task, but something you need to do each month. Does that make sense at all? Is that clear?
Yeah, I think so. And I think one of the most helpful things after the sessions that we did internally with you, Georgia, was actually booking in that follow-up appointment. So we actually had
Yeah.
to make the time to use the stuff that you'd given us. I think when you
Yeah.
start doing your own stuff, it makes so much more sense and you kind of really understand the real value and benefits of putting in the time with these custom GPTs and the prompts and stuff like that. So yeah, I think even if it doesn't make sense at the moment, if you can make 2 or 3 hours over the next few weeks for you to run back through this presentation and start trying things yourself, it should hopefully then make sense. And you'll, yeah, like I said, really see the benefits of spending time doing this.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Mads. I'll just quickly run through. Where are we for time, Mads? Because I don't want to make sure. Am I running over?
We've got about 10 minutes. So I think we've got
Okay.
time. We haven't got any other questions in the chat. So once you've
Okay.
finished, like I said, I'll come off the recording and we can see if we've got anything. And if we run over 5 or 10 minutes, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, if you need to finish at 3, please feel free to leave and you'll get the recording.
Okay, fab. I'll be quick. But yeah, it's a lot of information to take in. But if you can spend some time looking at these slides and then just taking these prompts and trying them out, you'll really see that it becomes very easy actually. And once you've got one set up, you can just mirror that then. So that's what we've said. So from there, you answer the questions, you configure the model, and you've got everything there. So those are the next steps you'll look at once you've put the prompt in. So in terms of final tips and takeaways, I think the main thing is that it's really good to think about AI as a real thinking partner and a real kind of collaborative experience rather than just something to kind of speed up workflows. So thinking about that sandwich method of using human expertise, AI knowledge, and then your own expertise at the end is really good and can be adopted with any kind of AI work. And then Orange is a really good framework to use when trying to create prompts. If you're unsure of what you actually need to give, if there's anything missing, that's a really good structure to follow. thinking about core tools and what tools you really want to invest in. So not worrying too much about the noise of all the updates that are coming out every single day, but just kind of homing in on a couple and focusing your efforts there. So we're not spreading ourselves too thin. Looking at and thinking about maybe using custom GPTs if you've got routine tasks that take up a lot of time every month, but you know could be automated, or maybe just for a space for ongoing projects where you really want to kind of save all that knowledge and build and work with ChatGPT to give you the insights that you might not have had before. Um, Quality over quantity, again, sort of, yeah, it's not about mastering every single prompt, template, or tool on the market. It's really just about how you work with it personally and thinking about how it can help you develop your own skills and push you beyond what you might have done before. And then just final couple of things. So I would always recommend if you're a marketing team to have one account that you can share between you, a paid account if possible, if you can. Um, just because it means that there's all the prompts are centralized, and if one of you has come up with a brilliant prompt, the other one can just pick that up, further down the line. Helps to keep things organized. And another thing just to mention is that I would recommend you either store your prompts, whether that's copying and pasting them into Word documents and storing them on a kind of server or your computers, or downloading. You can actually download the transcripts from the apps, because one thing that is really annoying about these tools is that if you accidentally delete a thread, it does go into the abyss. And I've done that before where I've had a really great prompt, and if you don't save it, it's gone. So I really recommend doing that just to keep track, and also and building a library for your team is always really useful. And if amongst all of this you're really still unsure of where to start, if you are a beginner, I'd really recommend just sort of making a note of all of the tasks that you do daily, monthly, and then doing a bit of an audit of thinking, now I've had to think about it in this way. What could I maybe use AI to help with? How could it help me push beyond what I've maybe done before? Um, and hopefully that will be a really good starting point of kind of, bringing AI more into your daily tasks. Um, I think that is everything. I'm sorry that was a lot of information, but does anyone have any questions at all?
Yeah, we've got a couple in the chat that I will ask you in a second, but I just want to say thank you so much for another very fantastic presentation. And yeah, I think like I said, if you take this and really spend the time figuring out for your firm and trying out those prompts and stuff, I really do think that you'll see the benefits. When AI first came out, I, did what everyone did on ChatGPT, asked it a few questions, was like, oh, this is rubbish, and then didn't bother to learn or keep up to date with it after that. But when Georgia did the internal training we had, it was a bit longer than this. We had about 3 hours, and we've had a couple of hours since. But she really made it sound interesting and exciting using these tools. And I went away and I used it. And yeah, I find them really, really helpful now. So I hope that you can all put a couple of hours aside and have a go at it as well. But yeah, thank you so much, Georgia, for sharing your expertise with
That's
us
okay.
all.
No problem at all. Do you want me to go into the
Perfect. And
questions, Mads?
yeah, because these ones have been asked in the chat, I will do them on the recording, but then I'll stop the recording, and if we have any others, we can answer them. But yeah, somebody has asked, they only use ChatGPT but get really annoyed with the Americanized terms and the use of Z, whereas we use S, color instead of color. Is there any way to stop this? They only use the free version at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. The free version is really bad for this at the minute, is that it really struggles to get that to move away from the American language. But a kind of solution to this is using the pro accounts. They are so much better at doing that. And as soon as you have those prompt threads and you've asked it once, please only respond in UK English, it will continue to do that. Another way is, where we looked at the settings on ChatGPT earlier, where you can customize your whole workspace in there, just popping in, please only use UK English. And custom GPTs again is another sort of step of doing that. It's just you can add all those instructions in there and it will make sure to respond that way. But I do find, yeah, that's a kind of constant struggle with the free version. And I can't remember which one it was I showed you earlier, which was a free account, but it was doing that a lot. So yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and I have noticed, like you said, creating those folders where you then have the thread, like the further bits of the conversation in the same thread, does minimize that happening again, which has been really, really helpful. So one of the great pieces of advice that you've given us. The next question, which I think you've seen because you've pulled up the costs, but somebody has asked how much the paid accounts cost roughly.
Yes, so ChatGPT, I'm just going to put this in the chat so you can, if anyone wants to have a look. So the plus version, I'm just reminding myself, so it's it's $20 a month. It works about £16 a month. That's what I'd probably recommend for all the teams of using a plus account. And then there's a pro account as well, which is everything plus newer models, which is 200 a month. And then there's Teams. So that's one that is really good for businesses. So it works at about about £20 per user. And that's something to say, for example, for Conscious, we have a Conscious team account, and that means you can have multiple users, but not everyone is seeing everything, in your workspace. It's not getting too cluttered. So that's really good for teams. And then they also offer an enterprise level, which is non-disclosed. They don't talk about the price, so I'm not sure what that would be, but I'm assuming it would be a lot. So that's for really huge teams where it needs to be spread across multiple users. But yeah, I think I can't stress enough how much I really find the plus version to be really valuable. If you can try and plead with whoever's sort of making that decision.
Yeah, and I quickly Googled the Perplexity prices, and they have similar types of subscriptions, and yeah, similar prices around £15 for those ones as well. And then I'm not sure if you'll know the answer to this one, Georgia, because yeah, it's not probably something that you have loads of access to, but how many users can be added to a paid ChatGPT account, and can you also log in on the computer and mobile under the same account?
So definitely yes to the last question around the mobile, but I will need to check with you. I'll need to check how many users, because I'm not 100% sure. Actually, David manages ours, and I'm not sure what the limit is. But what I'll do is when we
Yeah.
send the slides over, I'll send a message in there about that.
From my own experience, we have a conscious marketing account, which is one of the team members within this big team that we have, and we have 4 people logged into that at any one time. And touch wood, there haven't been any issues so far. So I would say I think you can have a few people. Maybe we just done it so we're not all using it at the same time. But I know there's been instances where we have.
One thing as well, which is useful, is if you have like a marketing email address, maybe, or if you have a team email address, if you set it up using that, then multiple people can access that email rather than you having to do it on every single email address.
Perfect. They said, sorry, they meant for themselves. They flip between the computer and phone. But yeah, you said definitely.
Yes, yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. You can use your computer and phone for the same account.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Georgia. I'm